Hey everyone, thank you so much for clicking on this video. The fact that you are willing to sacrifice a few minutes out of your day to consume my content really does mean the world to me. If you hear a ton of squeaking throughout this video, that's just my new puppy. She's got a chew toy. She's been going at it all night. So I'm going to try to edit out the noise, but I might not be successful. I can promise you she's very cute. But anyway guys, today we're going to be talking about the new Netflix series First Kill, which when I read the description, which describes, this relationship between a vampire and a monster hunter, I got a little bit excited. But it reminded me a lot of the Netflix show October Faction, which, if you guys remember, just promised so much but delivered very little. And so I was cautious going into the show because I didn't want a repeat of that. But from the beginning of the series to the end, I just felt the stench of October Faction all over this show. While the premise was great, while it promised a lot, it delivered very little in regards to true entertainment. But I'll break down all of that throughout this review, and I'll give you what in my opinion is good reasons why I don't think that the series necessarily captured my attention. But what I will say though is I watched this series, I actually watched it twice, and I finished watching it for the second time about 3 days ago. And I haven't been able to really bring myself to make a review because my opinions on it are always shifting and always changing. And it's because of the last half of the series, which is significantly stronger than the first half. The first half feels incredibly cliched in regards to story. Now, the story ultimately is the fact that we have a vampire hunter, or rather a monster hunter, and a vampire who's still, going through those stages. She's got to make that first kill. She's got to become a fully fledged vampire. And it's about the two of them who, are basically pulling off a Romeo and Juliet story. They're supposed to be enemies, but they end up coming together. And the biggest twist on this narrative, if you want to look at it from competing with other similar shows or movies like Twilight, True Blood, or Vampire Diaries, or even Underworld, the biggest difference between all of those shows and this one is that it doesn't follow a heterosexual couple, it follows a lesbian couple. Now, I'm not going to let that impact my feelings on the show at all, despite the fact that I do believe that this entire series was made purely for woke points, purely to pretty much push this agenda. I'm going to take that completely out of my mind. I'm going to address this as a show that is black and white. Is it good or bad? Take my personal feelings out of it, because at the end of the day, you guys aren't watching this for my personal feelings. You're watching this to figure out if this is a good show or not. I mentioned that this show felt very cliche in the first few episodes, and it did. It really did. Every classic stereotypical trope from any modern show is in this. The characters are very shallow in that regard. Yes, they've got, character development throughout the show. Yes, they've got their character arcs. But that's why I said the second half of the show felt much better than the first half. The first half, they're just stereotypes. They've still got to break out of their role as stereotypes. They've still got to find their own identity. But for the first 4 episodes, and that's how it's going to be for the entire show, the first 4 episodes just feel very mediocre and very cliche. The end of the show does get significantly better, but the issue is you've just sat through 4 episodes of mediocrity. Do you then continue to push yourself through for something that might get better? Because the unfortunate thing is as well, the show doesn't have a fixed conclusion at the end of season 1. You're going to have to eventually watch season 2 when it comes out if you want a proper conclusion to the story. And this show ends on a massive cliffhanger. So be prepared that if you want to start watching the show, you've got to be ready to invest not just 1 season's worth of time, but in fact, potentially 2, if not 3, depending on how long they want to bring the story out for. But this is why I'm having such a tricky time reviewing this, because I won't lie, I ended up getting some entertainment out of the final few episodes. The first 4, as I said, I've literally got to sit down and force myself to watch. And this was both the first time and the second time I watched the show. It's only once the characters start to break their stereotypes do they become a little bit more interesting. But in regards to the rest of the show, it doesn't necessarily help these characters. The visual effects, while we get very few actual proper visual effects shots, which I'm very grateful for, the few we get don't come off as impressive at all. There's this one scene where we see this vampire unhinge its jaw to go and like lunge at its victim. I almost laughed. It wasn't scary, it wasn't intimidating. And I just ended up sitting there going like, it would have been so much more convincing to just have, you know, vampire teeth prosthetics and have a vampire lunge at the camera, rather than this comically over-the-top unhinging of a jaw that didn't look convincing at all. In regards to, you know, prosthetics, in regards to actual makeup design, some of the monsters did look really, really great, but they didn't necessarily have enough time to shine, and that was disappointing. Another part of the show that felt very similar to October Faction was actually the choreography of the fight scenes. I mean, at the end of the day, as much as this is a drama, we're still talking about monster hunters, we're talking about vampires, we're talking about this massive, impressive collision, you know what I mean? These people are fighting to the death, and my puppy is going at it again. Sorry. But the choreography for this series left a whole lot to be desired. You can see that this is staged action, which is really, really unfortunate. There were a few scenes where I saw these punches and I was like, that's not convincing. Like, if that's not convincing to a human, there's no way that's gonna be convincing to a vampire. So we found ourselves in the situation where, look, if you're looking for representation, if you're looking for a story that isn't about a heterosexual couple, then that's a massive bonus for you. That is a big reason for you to want to watch this show. But if you are looking for a show that is well written, that treads new ground in regards to the supernatural, then you're going to find very little about that in the show. I can tell you this, the only thing I thought was impressive at all in this entire series from a lore point of view, from a supernatural point of view, was the inclusion of the myth of Lilith in the vampire's lore. But even then, like, personally, I think the myth of Lilith is, honestly, it's blasphemous at the end of the day. But moving on from that, I think that's a great reason to include Lilith in the vampire lore, because, you know, she was this character who in the myth was evil, but they've twisted it in the show to make her this courageous character, and that's why vampires are based off of her. The show also can feel a little bit predictable at times. Up until the final few episodes, where they decide to do some things that genuinely shocked me and surprised me, and I didn't think the show would necessarily have the courage to go in that direction, but it proved me wrong. So look, at the end of the day, I think, to sum it up, I'm gonna say this. The first half of the show was very difficult to watch, very stereotypical, very generic, very cliche, doesn't bring a lot of new content or new ideas to the table. Whereas the second half of the show then starts to get a lot more interesting when the dialogue starts to evolve, when the characters adapt to their current situation, when actually there's just more at stake. And you know what, at the end of the day, I cared very little about the protagonists of the show. I started to care a lot more about the secondary characters, about the characters around the primary plot. And I think that's also something that Netflix struggles with in general, is making genuinely likable lead characters. But then as well, going on from that, I have to say, I feel like a lot of people are going to fight my opinion on this show. A lot of people are going to enjoy this show. But personally, I just can't see why. People are going to talk about why they like the lead characters, because I can see that some people might, but it doesn't change the fact that I don't find them engaging, that I feel like they really were one-note characters. But I do believe that this show is going to be one that gets a bit of a cult following, if not a larger following, at the end of the day, because it has a lot, it ticks a lot of the, you know, traditional Netflix boxes. But yeah, guys, this review is very difficult to make, and as you can obviously hear, I'm still trying to make up my mind and come up with an actual conclusion to the show, rather than just, I didn't enjoy it. I'm trying to give it more credit. I'm trying my best to give you the pros and the cons, kind of put my own feelings aside for this review, rather than giving you my just like honest, true opinion. I'm trying to see it from both sides of the aisle, just so that I can avoid having to make another hate video. But guys, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. You guys are the best. You are awesome. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, and I hope to see you again in another review.